The Chicago skyline glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Palmer House Hilton's grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over the annual company party, their glow reflecting off champagne glasses and polished marble floors. I stood near the edge of the crowd, nursing a glass of sparkling water, watching my colleagues celebrate another successful year at Morrison & Associates. My name is David Sullivan, and at 55, I've spent the last 18 years climbing the ranks of this prestigious consulting firm. The same firm where I started as a junior analyst, working 60-hour weeks to provide for my family after my wife passed away. Tonight should have been a celebration. I just closed the biggest deal in the company's history, a $50 million contract that would secure jobs for hundreds of employees. The December wind rattled the windows, reminding everyone that Lake Michigan was just blocks away, its icy waters reflecting the city lights like scattered diamonds. Inside, the warmth of success and expensive wine created a bubble of corporate euphoria. Laughter echoed off the ornate ceiling as executives in designer suits mingled with support staff in their best formal wear. I adjusted my navy tie, the same one my son Michael had given me for Father's Day 3 years ago. He'd said it brought out my eyes, the same green eyes he'd inherited along with my stubborn streak and my tendency to work too hard. Tonight, he was supposed to join us. Fresh out of Northwestern's business school, he'd landed his first job at a competing firm downtown. I was proud, though I'd never admit how much I missed having him around. The evening had started perfectly. Colleagues congratulated me on the Morrison deal, clients shook my hand with genuine appreciation, and even the senior partners acknowledged my contribution with rare public praise. For a moment, I felt like the young analyst I'd once been, hungry, ambitious, and full of possibility. Then I saw him across the room, Tyler Chen, our new VP of Operations. At 29, Tyler was everything the modern corporate world seemed to value. Ivy League educated, tech-savvy, and blessed with the kind of confidence that came from never having to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. He'd been hired 6 months ago, brought in to modernize our approach and inject fresh energy into traditional practices. Tyler commanded attention effortlessly. His perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit probably cost more than I made in a month when I started here. His Harvard MBA hung on his office wall like a trophy, and his ideas about disrupting our industry were met with enthusiastic nods from executives eager to appear forward-thinking. I'd tried to work with him, really tried. When he suggested implementing new software systems, I supported the initiative. When he proposed restructuring client communication protocols, I adapted my methods. But there was always an undercurrent of condescension in our interactions, a subtle suggestion that my experience was less valuable than his education. "David," Tyler's voice cut through the ambient chatter as he approached with his usual entourage of young executives. "There's the man of the hour." Though I have to say, landing the Morrison deal was quite a surprise. The backhanded compliment hit its mark. Around us, conversations quieted as people sensed the shift in energy. Tyler's smile was perfectly calibrated, warm enough to seem friendly, sharp enough to draw blood. "Surprise?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "I've been building that relationship for 3 years." "Exactly," Tyler laughed, the sound carrying just a hint of mockery. "Old-school relationship building. Very traditional, though I wonder how much longer that approach will remain viable in our rapidly evolving marketplace." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. "Traditional approaches have their place," I replied carefully, aware that we now had an audience. "But results speak for themselves. The Morrison contract is the largest in company history." Tyler's smile widened, but his eyes remained cold. "Oh, absolutely, and we're all grateful for your persistence. Though I can't help but think what someone with a more contemporary skill set might have achieved. Perhaps a multi-year deal instead of just a single contract?" The suggestion that I'd somehow underperformed stung more than I cared to admit. Around us, I could see colleagues exchanging glances, some sympathetic, others clearly enjoying the show. The champagne in Tyler's hand caught the light as he gestured dismissively. "The thing is, David," Tyler continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world, "this industry is changing faster than ever. Clients want innovation, energy, fresh perspectives. They want to work with people who represent the future, not the past." A small crowd had gathered now, drawn by the tension like spectators at a car accident. I could feel my heart rate increasing, my palms growing damp. This wasn't just professional criticism. This was character assassination disguised as corporate strategy. "Experience has value," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. "Relationships built over years, trust earned through consistency. These things matter." Tyler laughed again, louder this time. "Experience? Is that what we're calling it?" He turned to address the growing crowd, his voice taking on the tone of a performer working an audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the challenge facing modern business. How do we balance respect for our veterans with the need for innovation?" The word veterans was delivered with just enough emphasis to make it clear he wasn't talking about military service. He was talking about age, about irrelevance, about being past my prime. "David here represents the old guard," Tyler continued, his voice gaining momentum. "Dedicated, certainly. Hardworking, absolutely. But perhaps too old for the demands of modern business?" The room fell silent, the kind of silence that follows a slap. The words hit me like a physical blow. Too old. In a room full of colleagues, clients, and friends, I'd been reduced to a liability, a relic of a bygone era. I could feel every eye in the room on me, waiting to see how I'd respond to this public humiliation. My mind raced through 18 years of memories. Late nights spent perfecting proposals while my son did homework at the kitchen table. Missed soccer games and school plays because a client needed attention. The slow, steady climb from junior analyst to senior partner, each promotion earned through dedication and results, not connections or credentials. I thought about my wife, Sarah, who'd believed in me when I was just a kid from the South Side with big dreams and bigger debts. She'd worked 2 jobs to put me through night school, never complaining when I came home exhausted and stressed. When cancer took her 12 years ago, this job became more than a career. It became my way of honoring her sacrifice, of providing for our son, of proving that hard work and integrity still mattered. "Too old," I repeated quietly, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Around me, I could see faces filled with a mixture of sympathy and secondhand embarrassment. Some looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Others seemed to be enjoying the spectacle, perhaps relieved that they weren't in my position. Tyler's confidence was infectious. Several younger executives nodded in agreement, their expressions suggesting they'd been thinking the same thing but hadn't dared voice it. The future belonged to them, their faces seemed to say. The past, my past, was just an obstacle to overcome. "I understand the value of fresh perspectives," I said finally, my voice carrying 3 decades of earned authority. "But wisdom isn't obsolete just because it comes with gray hair." Tyler's laugh was sharp, cutting. "Wisdom? David, this is the 21st century. Wisdom is knowing when to step aside and let the next generation take the lead. Wisdom is recognizing that your time has passed." The cruelty was surgical, precise, designed to cut deep and leave lasting scars. The applause started slowly. A few claps from Tyler's inner circle, then spreading like wildfire through the younger staff members. The sound was devastating, not just the applause itself, but what it represented. Approval, agreement, a collective judgment that I was indeed too old, too outdated, too irrelevant for the modern business world. I stood there, frozen, as the applause grew louder. Faces that had smiled at me earlier in the evening now wore expressions of polite agreement with Tyler's assessment. The Morrison deal, my 18 years of service, my dedication to the company, all of it seemed to evaporate in the face of this public humiliation. "You see?" Tyler said, his voice rising above the applause. "The market has spoken. This is what progress looks like, David. Sometimes we have to make difficult decisions about who belongs in the future we're building." The implication was clear. I didn't belong. At 55, with decades of experience and a track record of success, I was being written off as a relic. The applause continued, each clap feeling like a nail in the coffin of my career. I could feel my hands trembling slightly, my breath coming in short bursts. This wasn't just about my job anymore. This was about my identity, my worth, my legacy. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed reduced to a punchline at a company party. "The beautiful thing about business," Tyler continued, clearly enjoying his moment in the spotlight, "is that it's a meritocracy. Results matter, yes, but so does adaptability. So does the ability to evolve with changing times. And frankly, some people just can't make that transition." More applause. Louder now. I could see phones being raised, people recording this moment for social media. My humiliation was becoming entertainment, a viral moment in the making. That's when I noticed movement near the ballroom entrance. A familiar figure in a charcoal gray suit, his green eyes scanning the room with the intensity I recognized from countless family dinners and heart-to-heart conversations. My son Michael had arrived. He stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in the scene, the crowd, the applause, Tyler's triumphant expression, and me, standing alone in the center of it all like a defendant awaiting verdict. I saw his jaw tighten, his hands clench into fists. The applause was reaching its crescendo when Michael began walking toward us, his footsteps echoing off the marble floor with the rhythm of approaching thunder. The applause died instantly as Michael stepped into the circle. At 26, he had my height and his mother's grace, but in that moment, he carried himself with an authority that commanded immediate attention. The room fell silent, sensing that something significant was about to happen. "Excuse me," Michael said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. I couldn't help but overhear the conversation about my father being too old. Tyler's confident expression faltered slightly. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "Michael Sullivan," my son replied, extending his hand with the kind of firm grip I'd taught him years ago. "David's son. And apparently, I need to educate you about something." The crowd pressed closer, phones still recording, but now the energy had shifted. This wasn't just corporate drama anymore. This was personal. "You want to talk about being too old?" Michael's voice grew stronger, more commanding. "Let me tell you about this old man. When I was 8 years old, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. While she fought for her life, my father worked 2 jobs, his day job here and freelance consulting at night, to pay for experimental treatments not covered by insurance. Tyler's face was beginning to pale, but Michael wasn't finished. When she died, he could have remarried, could have focused on himself. Instead, he worked 16-hour days to make sure I could go to college without debt. He missed dates, turned down promotions that required travel, sacrificed his own social life, all so I could have opportunities he never had. The room was completely silent now. I could see tears in several people's eyes, including some who had been applauding just moments before. "You want to know about adaptability?" Michael continued, his voice rising with passion. "This old man learned computer programming at 45 so he could better serve his clients. He got his master's degree at 50, taking night classes while working full-time. He speaks 3 languages and has built relationships in 12 countries. Tyler tried to interrupt. "Look, I'm sure your father is a good man, but I'm not finished," Michael said sharply, his green eyes blazing with the same intensity I'd seen when he defended classmates from bullies in elementary school. "You want to talk about results? The Morrison deal everyone's celebrating tonight? That wasn't just a lucky break. That was 3 years of relationship building, of understanding their business better than they understood it themselves, of providing value that went far beyond the contract." He turned to address the entire room now, his voice carrying the conviction of absolute truth. "But here's what really matters," Michael said, his voice cracking slightly with emotion. "This man taught me that success isn't about stepping on others to climb higher. It's about lifting others up as you rise. He taught me that integrity matters more than profit, that relationships matter more than transactions, that wisdom comes from experience, not just education." The silence was profound now. Even Tyler seemed to shrink under the weight of Michael's words. "So when you call him too old," Michael concluded, his voice steady and strong, "you're not just insulting my father. You're insulting every value that built this company, every principle that makes business worth doing, every lesson that turns a job into a calling." He paused, looking directly at Tyler. "And that makes you the one who's truly outdated." The silence that followed Michael's words was different from before. It wasn't the uncomfortable quiet of witnessing humiliation. It was the profound stillness that follows truth spoken with courage and love. I looked around the room and saw something I hadn't expected: shame on the faces of those who had applauded my dismissal. Tyler stood frozen, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. The phones that had been recording my humiliation were now capturing his. Tyler began, but the words seemed to stick in his throat. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked his age, young, uncertain, and suddenly very small in his expensive suit. Margaret Morrison, our CEO, stepped forward from the crowd. At 62, she'd built this company from a small Chicago firm into a national powerhouse. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, her expression unreadable. "Tyler," she said quietly, "I think you owe David an apology." The words hung in the air like a judgment. Tyler's face went through a spectrum of emotions: anger, embarrassment, and finally, something that might have been genuine remorse. "David, I spoke out of turn. I'm sorry." It wasn't eloquent, but it was sincere. I nodded, accepting the apology with the grace my son had just demonstrated was possible. Michael walked over to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Sorry I'm late, Dad. Traffic was terrible." I looked at my son, this young man who had just defended my honor with the same passion I'd once used to defend his right to dream big, and felt a pride that had nothing to do with business deals or corporate success. "Thank you," I whispered. He smiled, the same smile that had lit up our kitchen table during homework sessions and bedtime stories. "You taught me that family stands up for family. Always." As the party slowly resumed around us, I realized that Tyler had been wrong about one thing. Experience wasn't about age. It was about the wisdom to know what truly mattered, and the courage to fight for it when it was threatened. Some lessons, I thought, can only be learned with time. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever been underestimated because of your age or watched someone you love stand up for what's right, please share this video. Sometimes the most powerful moments come not from boardrooms or business deals, but from the courage to defend those we love. Subscribe for more stories that remind us that true success isn't measured in profits or promotions, but in the relationships we build and the values we pass on. Remember, experience isn't just about growing older. It's about growing wiser, and wisdom is never outdated.